Hey guys, this is Juliet, your host. Just popping in to say if you like this podcast, subscribe for more content. I've been creating some great bonus material for you. Please subscribe and download so I can keep bringing you more permission granted. Thanks for your support. Hi, thank you for listening to Permission Granted. I'm your host, Juliette Ricci Lagman. Today we have on the pod Suzette Mullen. Suzette is a nonfiction author. Um, she is also a book coach and a founding member of the Lancaster, Pennsylvania LGBTQ plus coalition. Welcome, Suzette.
Hi, Juliet, sorry. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you on the pod. I've been waiting for this conversation. Um, I want to just start. Just tell me a little about yourself.
Yeah, well, I am, as you mentioned, I'm the author of a memoir called I just happen to have a copy of it here. I travel with it everywhere. It's called The Only Way Through Is Out. It's a memoir about my coming out later in life journey. It was published in February of last year, 2024, by the University of Wisconsin Press. And I speak to audiences about authenticity and new beginnings. And I also coach writers, especially in the memoir space. And I love helping writers get really clear on their deeper story and what they really want to say to the world. I
I
live,
love it.
yeah, I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania now. And yeah, I'm sitting in a recording studio at my co-working space called the Candy Factory, which is an amazing space. It happens to be just across the street from where I live, so I have a lovely commute. And let's see, what else? I could go on forever. Just a couple of personal details. I'm the mother of two young adult sons. They're not so young adults, they keep getting older. And I love to practice yoga, and I'm kind of a foodie, and I
Ooh,
enjoy good wine and travel. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
I love it. I'm just going to dive into the writing part because that is how I know you.
Hmm.
Uh, how did you know that you wanted to be a writer?
Oh, that's such a great question. So it's kind of a two-part answer. The first part is I wasn't one of those children that, at 5 said, I want to be a writer and I'm going to be a writer the rest of my life. But I was always someone who enjoyed writing and was good at it. It was an area that was just it came naturally to me. Also editing. And so I was writing in many different capacities throughout my life. First as a lawyer and doing some nonprofit work. I did try to quote unquote, I'm using air quotes here, be a writer in my late 30s, into my 40s, really, I started going to some writing conferences and taking some classes. And I really thought I wanted to write a book, but I never could really get any momentum with it. I would sort of start, but then I'd stop. Um, and, but so there was that whole early part of my life where it was part of my life, but I wasn't claiming my identity as a writer. And
Yeah.
in my early 50s, when my youngest child went off to college and I was an empty nester, I was really uh, determined to put a stake in the ground professionally in some way or the other. I mentioned I'd been a lawyer, I'd been many things, but when my nest was empty, I didn't know what my next act would be professionally. And one day, and I actually write about this in my memoir. One day I sat down with my journal and I was really trying to quote unquote figure it out. What am I supposed to do with my life? What's the
Mhm.
next thing? And I started writing down all the things that I was good at and that I loved to do that brought me joy. And when I looked at the list, everything on the list had something to do with writing or editing.
Oh my God.
And I had that inner voice, every once in a while it speaks to you really clearly. It was one of those
Yes.
moments. And the voice said to me, "You're a writer, stop fighting it." And
Ah,
I was just like, okay, because I kept looking for something outside of myself. What am I going to do professionally in this next chapter of my life? And it was so clear, but I was circling around it. And so that was the moment I was like, okay, yep. And I put a stake in the ground. I started calling myself a writer. I started getting some editing clients. I began working on a memoir, not the one that I eventually published, but another one, and that was in 2013. So
oh wow.
I was in my early 50s, and so that was 12 years ago, and I really haven't looked back. I mean,
Mhm.
how my writing life and my coaching life have evolved and continue to evolve over time, but the clarity that this is who I am and what I'm meant to do hasn't changed since then.
Yeah, it's very strong. Now, once you kind of said, "Okay, I hear you, universe," and you made that claim, did you feel like things just started falling into place, like everything just shifted? And I'm not saying perfectly, but just things started aligning in general.
Yes, it's funny, Juliette. I literally this morning was telling this story to
Woo.
my personal trainer. I am, I'm at that age where I've really got to strengthen those bones and all of that. You have that coming. Um,
Yep.
and so we ended up having this conversation, and I was telling him how the day after I said I'm a writer and an editor, and I do tend to be my tendency is to be a bit of an overthinker. I
Mm,
do tend to, want to get everything perfect and lined up and all of that, but somehow it was different here. So literally the day after I said I'm a writer, I'm an editor, and I started working on a website, just a simple website to kind of say, my door is open for editing projects. I hadn't even put the website up yet, and I got a message from an acquaintance who was working on a book project with, it was a major nonfiction project with several other authors. And he just reached out to me and he said, "We need an editor. Do you know anyone who can do that?"
oh my
And
gosh.
I said, "Yes, I can," even though I really wasn't sure I knew what I was doing, but I knew that I could do it. I knew I could help him. I knew I could figure out what I needed to do. And it was such affirmation to me that, yes, I had heard that voice and that, yes, this was the path I was supposed to be on.
I just have to share with you my experience of your book. Like, um, I I actually don't read as much as people may think, and I'm kind of a slow reader, but my favorite is, self-help memoirs or
Hmm.
memoirs. And your book, when I was so excited because I felt like I had been part of the journey as you had been promoting it prior to the publication. And I would like go to, and this is how you know you have a good book. I would go to bed and I would just be like so excited to jump in bed and read, even if it was a few pages. And and it was just a delicious, delicious, heartwarming, amazing memoir. I just can't gush enough because it really is a story about authenticity and finding freedom. And my journey has always been in the occupation world. And whilst you're talking about writing, that is the same experience that I've had. Like, I'm even going through it now. Like, stop doing all these other things and just admit that this is where you're supposed to be, you know?
Yeah, and I wonder why that's hard for some of us. And I mean, I can only speak to my own experience. I think that there's something very vulnerable about, um, you know, identifying yourself in a certain way,
Yeah,
especially when you are new at it or you're kind of a beginner.
yeah.
If you say you're a writer, well, guess what? The first question people ask you is like, "Oh, what have you written?" Or, "Oh, do
Yep.
you have a book out there? Oh, where can I buy your book?" And whatever. And, I do have a book out there now, but I didn't 12 years ago when I really started on this journey. And you can
Yeah.
really get caught up in imposter syndrome and
Oh,
all
yeah.
kinds of things. And the writers I work with, many of whom are newer writers, I, I just try to say to them, if you are writing, you're a writer. I mean,
Yeah.
publishing a book
Yes.
is not the criteria for claiming an identity of a writer. Writing a book, there's a lot of different ways that you can be a writer, and writing a book and publishing a book is a long journey, and it is literally
Yeah.
only one path in the identity of a writer.
What was your experience, speaking of publishing,
Hmm.
in finding a publisher? What did that journey look like? And I understand you had written the book and then you essentially retooled it and rewrote it.
Yes, so well, it's a long and winding journey, but I will try to curate it for the audience here. I'd written another book about my professional journey and a memoir, and in the course of writing that memoir, I got led to this other story, which was about
Mm,
my sexual identity.
mhm,
And so I lived that story, um, and the repercussions of really coming to terms with who I was at midlife. And then I wrote about it. So that's the memoir. The Only Way Through is out.
mhm,
I began working on this book in January of 2018. So not terribly long after the events of the story were over, about nine
mhm.
months after. And, in the beginning, the first draft or so was, very much like just getting down on the page the things that happened, which is kind of what we typically do when we're writing memoir in the beginning. We write,
Mhm.
okay, we know kind of the general story we want to tell and we write it, but we don't really understand the meaning behind the events. And that's really what readers care about. And
Yeah.
so it takes multiple drafts and a lot of digging and a lot of soul searching to get really clear on the deeper story. So it took a while and many drafts for me to get there. And eventually, I pitched my manuscript in March, well, in the winter of 2022.
Oh,
And
wow.
I had a University of Wisconsin Press was interested, and we began a whole nother process. They said they were interested. They wanted to look at my book proposal, which is a business, basically a business plan for your book.
Yeah.
And I had already finished the book. I had a completed manuscript, but I also had this book proposal. So they wanted to see my book proposal. They saw it, they liked it. Then they said, "Okay, we'd like to see the manuscript." They saw it, they read it, they liked it. But then there were several more steps along the way, in additional review that had to happen. And so when they first expressed interest in, say, March of 2022, and I signed my contract with them in October of 2023. And in an incredible, I don't even know what the word is, mystery. I think that's the word. Incredible mystery of the universe. I signed my contract on National Coming Out Day. That is
Oh,
literally just the day it happened to land in my inbox.
wow.
So I signed a contract with them in the fall of 2022. There was more work I needed to do on the book. So there was a whole nother process of revision and copy editing and proofreading and all the things that happened. And the book was finally released out in the world on February 13th, 2024. So
Wow.
it's a long journey,
It's a
but
very
worth
long
it.
journey. Yeah, and people could say, "Oh, why don't you writers just churn out book after book?" It's because, I'm not going to say it's your baby because that's not exactly it. It's just that there is so much that goes into it, and honestly, it's quality, and it just takes a lot of work.
Well, and different, yes, I completely agree with what you're saying. And also, different genres require different amounts of time.
Yeah.
Memoir, I would reckon to say, is one of the more challenging genres, which might seem counterintuitive to some people because you might say, oh, well, it's your story, you know it, and all of that. You don't have to make up, it's not like writing a novel, you're not making things up, but you need to master the skills of a fiction writer, how
Hmm.
to tell a story, how to create tension, how to make the reader care about the character and the journey they're going on, which is the exact same thing you have to do as a novel writer.
Yeah.
But it's your own story, and so it's very difficult for you to see the deeper story because you've lived
Mhm.
it and you know it so well. And so yeah, a memoir takes a while. Now, if you're writing thrillers or mysteries, not saying those are easy. I have no idea how to write one of those. That is not my genre. But writers who are more in what we call genre fiction, whether it's a
Mhm.
romance or there's a bit more of a formula to how those books tend to be written and the readers are expecting it. And you do see writers, more experienced writers, churning out romance or churning
Yep,
out and I don't mean churning sounds perhaps pejorative, and I don't mean it to be. They're able to write their books pretty quickly and get them out in the world, and they can be, and their readers are eager for them. They're waiting for them. Not so much with
exactly.
memoir. Memoir, it takes time.
And memoir, you're essentially filling in the blanks for your reader, because they haven't lived your story. So you really have to go back and like, okay, and what? Because as the person who has experienced it, you're like, oh, I know exactly how this story goes. So you
Right,
really have to
right.
go back deeper, like you said.
We
Um,
we call that in the book coaching biz, we call that the curse of the author's knowledge.
oh,
And this is true for memoir. It's also true for fiction because fiction writers get to know their characters so well,
yeah,
and they know their characters well beyond what ends up on the page, and certainly that's true of a memoir writer. And we don't realize we're making all kinds of assumptions about what the reader actually knows,
yeah,
and we don't realize they don't know it. And that is why no matter what you're writing, you absolutely need to get input from other people. I mean, you don't have to hire a professional. You don't have to pay for a book coach or an editor. Although if you have
I
the
highly recommend.
resources, I certainly recommend it. Um, But, there are many other ways that you can get feedback that is helpful. We call them beta readers, or you can be part of a writing group. And because your readers will see things, those missing pieces that you
Yes.
don't see, and they help you, they help you fill in the gaps, as you said.
Well, since we kind of touched on it, let's talk about book coaching.
Sure.
I definitely benefited from working with you. And as I'm sure you know, I worked with Jocelyn Lindsay.
Hmm.
And what is it about book coaching that, well, I can speak to the accountability piece and the cheerleading piece like that. That is what, but you specifically, your business is called, is it Find Your Story? Your Story
Your
Finder.
story finder. Yes, yes, yes.
Yes. And
Yeah,
what are the benefits there? Yeah.
yeah. So, I did name my business Your Story Finder way back when, before I was even a book coach, because I identified that kind of my superpower, my coaching superpower was
Yeah.
helping writers, no matter what they were writing, to find the deeper story, to find what the meaning of the making meaning of the events that they wanted to write about. And so um I there's a wide range of things that book coaches can do, and some book coaches work with writers from, you know, before they've put a word on the page and take them all the way through publication. And then other book
Mhm.
coaches specialize in certain aspects of the process. And
Mm.
where I have landed is I love helping writers, in particular, getting clear on what is the story that they want to tell, and what is this book really about, and who is it really for, and all of the things,
Yeah.
and really getting those foundational pieces in place before they spend hours and hours, and sometimes years and years writing a manuscript that doesn't have focus and doesn't
Yeah.
have the structure. And it really saves writers a lot of time in the long run to put in the time in the beginning to get clear on the deeper story. So that's what my business has kind of pivoted to. I'm spending, I think, Juliet, you probably have experiences or are experiencing it. When you're in business for yourself, you're you're constantly iterating. You're figuring out what works and what you love to
Yes.
do,
Hmm.
and what the market seems to need, and all of those things. And I have done a lot of different things as a book coach, but where I've landed now is just working with um, a few select clients at a time, memoir
Mm.
clients, and really helping them get clear on the foundational pieces of their story, which
Yeah.
sounds simpler than it is, but it's actually really deep work. And then
Hmm.
they go off and they either write the draft on their own, or I have a community of book coaches who I can match my writers with if they want ongoing accountability. And so that's kind of where my business is today, because I'm spending more time on my own writing. I'm working on my next book.
Ooh.
I am working on developing a speaking career. And so there's only so many hours in a day. So
Yep.
um, you prioritize and you pivot. But I love the book coaching, and
Yeah.
um, I don't anticipate a time when I'm not doing some book coaching.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if it's just keeping a few small clients, like you said, or such like that, I want to kind of turn to I don't want to spoil the whole story, although feel free,
Okay,
but
okay.
I kind of want to turn to how is a deep question, but how did you find your bravery to make that decision to change your life? Like the point where, you decided to pursue this other relationship, essentially.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and this is what I mean, great question. And obviously, I've thought about that because I wrote a whole book about it. But I've also, how do I answer that? Because I was living it. Um, so I am going to answer your question. And if I don't, call me back on it. But I want to
Okay.
just sort of zoom out a little bit. I
Yeah.
think this is really universal. And
Mhm.
why I think my book has, hit a chord with a lot of readers beyond women that are
Mhm.
coming out later in life. That's obviously part of my audience, but
I'm one.
yeah, yeah. And I think that we all reach crossroads in our life when we we can see a different future ahead, or we know that the life that we're currently living is no longer the life that we want to live, or there's something else out there for us. And that can look at like so many different things. It can look
Yeah.
like potentially leaving a marriage or a long-term relationship. It could be coming out. It could be changing careers. It could be moving. I mean, leaving you know, a, a, a church community. I mean, there's so many different big leaps
Yeah.
um, and crossroads that we face. And maybe for some people, those leaps are not as difficult. I can't speak to other people's experience, but what I can speak to is my own, which is that I was a very, and still am, by nature, a very risk-averse person. I did
Mm.
not want to make a mistake. I didn't want to get this wrong. And the cost for me, it felt like the cost was astronomical. I was contemplating when I came to terms with my sexuality, which was, I recount in lots of detail in the book of
Yes.
how that all unfolded. But when I finally did acknowledge, yes, I was attracted to women. Yes, I was probably gay. Early on, it was hard for me to put a label on it. Um, I still had to choose. Well, I mean, yeah, that all that may be true, but am I going to do anything about it? And I was in a
Yeah.
30-year marriage. To a lovely man, I had a very comfortable and good life. And I needed there came a point where that proverbial, that cliche that we all talk about of like walking up to the edge of the cliff, right? And
Yeah.
you're peering over the edge, and there does come a time that you have to jump or you don't jump, and you back off, and you
Mm.
make a decision to stay where you are. And as I recount in the book, there was a moment when, I mean, because I went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
Mm.
What's the right thing to do? Can I do this? Should I do this? How can I hurt my husband? All of those questions. And there came a point where, again, it was sort of that real clarity, like I
Mm.
mentioned earlier about that inner voice, where I just knew that I wasn't willing to go to my grave without knowing who I was fully, and that the
Oh,
only
wow.
way I could do that was to leave this life that had so much good in it, and to,
Hmm.
there would be repercussions and pain and hurt for not only myself, but for other people in my life. But I really asked myself, am I willing to live like I'm living now for the rest of my life
Hmm.
or not? And I knew I wasn't, and I knew it wasn't going to get any easier.
Yeah.
And so I finally I finally jumped. I finally made the leap because I felt like I didn't that was the only way I could really live. And
And I
yeah,
want to just jump in here. What comes to me, and I've heard this in other stories, is the pain of, sorry, the pain of not knowing who you truly were was more than the pain of the risk, basically, and taking that leap. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I somebody way smarter and probably much more articulate than me has said that we only change when the pain of staying in the known
Mm.
is greater than the potential pain of jumping into the unknown. And that's really where I was. And
Yeah.
believe me, when your listeners read my book, they will see that I did pretty much everything I could to see if I could just put the genie
Yeah.
back in the bottle once I knew, I really did try to just say, can I just stay in my life?
Mhm.
And eventually I decided I couldn't.
And you and I have talked about Glennon Doyle,
Mm-hmm.
she's one of my favorite.
Yeah.
She talks about in her book, how does it say, like the cheetah story, and perfectly, she had a perfectly wonderful life. So why did she want to blow it up? But it's because there was something else out there, that she needed to be, you know?
Yeah, and I think that, we do, and I certainly have used that term, blow up our lives, destroy,
Mhm.
all of those things, because that's what it feels like
Mm,
when we're contemplating it, and even maybe right when we first make the leap. Um, but I think on the other side, what I've experienced, and certainly we see, Glennon's life.
yeah.
What I've experienced is that, yeah, I mean, I would, would use different language now.
Mm,
I've changed my life. I've transformed my life. I have a very different life. And I'm, I feel like I'm finally living the life I was intended to live. And,
uh,
for there's a lot. I was in many different, and I still am in some later in life support groups that are mostly on
mhm.
Facebook. And, the same questions that
Mm,
women that are just at the beginning of their journey, the same questions I was asking myself, they're asking, is it, can I do this? Is it the right thing to do? What if it doesn't work out? All of those
yeah.
things. And you don't you don't know what it's going to look like on the other side. I mean,
Yep.
that's the whole thing. Any leap, right? If we knew, if we had a guarantee, well, and it was a good guarantee, it'd be a lot easier to leap, right? But we don't
Yes.
know. And so we have to make that decision with imperfect information. And we create our lives as we live them. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Tell me about the support that you found during your leap, the group that you talk about. I think it's the Lalas.
Yes, I called them the Lalas. Yeah, so that was really a lifeline to me in the early stages of my journey, really of questioning, was I gay or not? Or maybe it was just this one woman I was attracted to, all of those questions. And I found, of course, I was Googling like crazy to find out any information because I didn't know a single other soul at the
Hmm.
time who was going through what I was going through, and I felt very
Hmm.
alone. And I found a blog by a woman that was blogging about coming out later in life, and she was just about to start a Facebook group, and it was a secret group, so you didn't have to worry about like people finding it out, and you had to email her and let her know why you wanted to be part of the group. And I did
Wow.
that, and that was really scary. I talk about that in my book. I was
Hmm.
terrified to send that email because I think I knew once I did, then I was like, you know, I was starting to leap. I was starting to go on the other side. And at the time when I joined the group, it had just started and it was about 50 women and at different stages of their journey, and some of them became my biggest support, and they were women that I had never met in real life, but really I could be real with them. They understood my
Hmm.
journey. They helped me through some of the hardest times. And the group eventually grew to, several thousand members. And
Wow.
some of the groups, like I mentioned, that original group is no longer in existence, but let me just say, there's a lot of later in life groups on Facebook with like thousands of women from all over the world. And I'm not super active in them anymore, but I do pop in occasionally and try to offer some support when I can, being on this side of it, and just really
Yeah.
more not telling people what to do because you can't do
Hmm.
that. But you can share your own story, which is part of the reason I wrote my book.
Yeah.
And you can just let them know that they're not alone. I mean, that
Yeah.
what they're experiencing is something that other people have experienced and others have gotten to the other side.
Yes, yes. And this is going to be a bit of a heavy question, but um, in this political climate, is there any advice for the LGBTQ plus, folks out there that you would give? Like, how can they be supported? How can they find support and such like that?
Yeah, understatement of the year. It's a challenging time for that community. It's a challenging time for many
Mhm.
communities, marginalized people who are part of marginalized communities for sure. Um, I guess my advice would be pretty similar to the advice I would have given even before um, the current administration, which is find your people. Um,
Yeah.
Find your people. And so, um, well, I don't have any magic answers. Uh,
Right.
and I guess I would say two things. One is find your people, however you
Mhm.
can find your people. Um, Ideally, you find actual people in real life. If you're living in a more urban setting, that may be easier because there's a more
Mhm.
concentration of people. There may be a pride center. There may be different organizations that are supporting the LGBTQ plus community. But find your people because you are not alone. And we
Right.
do need people. And if you are living, in a more rural area and you don't have easy access to um, people in real life, you know, see if you can find some support online like I did. I mean
Yeah.
it's a simple answer to a complex question, but I do think that one of the things that's so difficult right now and is just feeling very helpless
Hmm.
and very much alone. And I think that um, just knowing that you're not facing this horror by yourself is
Yeah.
something that is really, really helpful. And then the second part of the answer, I'm going to steal a little bit from Glennon Doyle. I was
Mhm.
just listening to a clip of an interview she did, well, the three podcasters did
Mhm.
on the Daily Show. And
Oh.
yeah, and I haven't watched the whole thing, but I saw it on Instagram, and she was Glennon was asked, kind of how are you doing right now? And Glennon was like,
Mm.
yeah, not so great, and just have felt kind of frozen and what what do I do? What can I do? Feeling very helpless. And
Yeah.
then she mentioned that um, she connected with a particular organization that was working on a particular aspect of the one of the many problems that we have going on in the country right now.
One thing.
Basically, one thing. So it was a deportation of minors.
Okay.
And I think the name of the project was the Florence Project, which I'm not familiar with, but that was what she mentioned. And she said that once she connected with them, it was like she found her lane. It was just
Mm.
and so I think the other piece of advice is to try to find your lane. Do find one thing that
Yes.
you can do
Yeah.
because it is overwhelming. It is and it's so easy to just throw up your hands and feel like you can't do anything. And
Yeah.
so um I'm I've got several things that I'm I've got a little bit of, I've dipped my toe into, but I haven't really jumped full into something. So I'm going to take Lennon's words to heart as well and to just
Yeah.
find that one thing. And I think if that's all each one of us does, we have
Hmm.
some reason for hope.
Because there's very many of us, and there's also a lot of different issues that need help. So that's perfect advice. I totally agree with it, and I've started writing letters because that's my comfort zone, and it's something that is easy for me to do. So I can just whip out a letter really quick, and in volume, it speaks really loud to our representatives and the Supreme Court, et cetera, et cetera. So that's great advice. I want to we're going to kind of wind down here, but just a simple question of maybe not simple. Your next book, can you tell me a little bit about that and what it's about?
Sure. Well, the current title is After the Leap. Um,
Ooh,
um, that may or may not end up being the final title, but so I'm really the first book ends really I've just made this leap into the new life.
yeah,
And so that the next book is sort of what happened next. And I am and let's just say it's life has a lot of plot twists and I've had some
yep,
plot twists. And it's been interesting working on this. I'd say I'm about halfway through my first draft, although I have, just like I recommend to my book coaching clients, I have done all the planning work and I have a structure for the book, which, could change, but I have
yeah,
I have something, and I'm pretty clear on what the book is about. I would say the bumper sticker message of this book is that authenticity is a lifelong journey. Um,
yeah,
and so it is, it's really about what the continued self-discovery after I made what felt like the biggest leap of my life and probably still was, but there were more leaps to come.
mhm,
And that is part of the message of the book is that, you're not one and done. You don't stop
Yep.
becoming
And
and
evolving.
evolving, and
Mhm.
you also, darn it, keep meeting yourself where you are. You think you're over certain things. You think,
Yes.
oh God, and then you're like, oh man, you mean I'm still dealing with this, or and
Yeah.
but you learn that you are different. You have changed because while you
Mhm.
might still keep dealing with some of your same stuff, you recognize it more quickly now, and you don't let it control your life. And
Mm.
so yeah, so it's it's been fun at times, frustrating at times. Uh, Funny you ask about this today. I This morning I was working on it, and it was really the first morning in a while that I felt like I had some real energy around it because I sort of unlocked a few things, and I was like,
Mm.
okay. And it just started. I was excited to get back to the page. So,
Mm.
yeah, so I'm working on it. I don't know when it will be ready to, to query, but I'm hoping it will be a shorter journey than the first book.
Hmm. I'm sure it will because you have that muscle memory and all those connections, and you're kind of in that. This is my experience because I'm just about to really dive into writing my next book. I had like a 2 year span of writing the book, and then I had a 6 month of like full speed ahead, like we're putting this into production where it was the real deal, you know?
Right, right.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
it's so delicious. It's kind of enjoying that journey of being, like you said this morning, where you unlock some things. That is such a good feeling, and that's kind of what it's all about, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I hadn't had that feeling in a while, and
Mm,
I think this is very typical of writers. I don't, maybe all creatives, I don't
hmm.
know. I had, I'd say I've had a lot of doubts about, is this book going to really happen? Is this worth writing? All of those questions. And literally this morning, all I wanted to do was, I didn't even want to take a shower. But I knew I had to because I was coming over to do this podcast, and I just
Yeah,
wanted to keep going. And that is the best feeling in the world.
the
And
best.
it doesn't happen that often. And a little piece of advice to anyone who is a writer out there is, if you or thinks they might want to be a writer, if you wait until you have a moment like that, you're never going to really
Yep.
get the project done.
What's
You have to work through it, and then this is this is the gift that you get occasionally, and it's
yes,
so great when it happens.
inspiration finds you working. It's something like there's a quote out
Yes,
there.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So you just
Absolutely.
got to get to work and just do it, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden it strikes. I want to, and you just reminded me. So the book, I just want to comment, is so beautiful because we've that word snippet comes to mind, snippets of
Hmm.
stories, but it's so beautiful how you weave the past into the present, and it's weaved beautifully throughout the book. I mean, I so enjoyed that, and I so treasured it because you don't see that a lot.
Yeah, that was a huge challenge. And the there were a lot of different moving pieces, and I had to play with the order. I had the main story that I was telling largely in chronology, but all of the important moments from the past,
Hmm.
where did they fit in? And that's a big challenge for the memoir writer. And
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that it was successful, at least
Hmm.
from your perspective. And yeah, it that was one of the biggest challenges. And when I work with writers, that's one of the things that we work on. And there's not necessarily a right or wrong, and it's not one answer of
Hmm.
how that works, but you have to just be willing to play around and try things out and see what lands.
Exactly. And it's like, being willing to go back in there and sort of retool, and as they say, not write a book about the book, but actually write the book, that's how you know you're committed and it's your heart, and it's your true story. Um, I just want to ask a few more things. So, where can people find you and your book if they are interested in coaching or speaking, anything in your book?
Yeah, thank you. Well, the book, The Only Way Through, is out. You can find at any major retailer online, and I really love to encourage people to patronize their local independent
Mhm.
bookstore. And so if you if this book is not on the shelf there, you can go to your independent or call your bookstore and say, would you order this book for me? And they will do
Mhm.
that. So um I'm really encouraging
I
people
agree.
to do that. Or bookshop, if you want to use an online retailer, bookshop.org is
Mm.
um it is a really nice alternative to the online retailer who shall remain nameless that most of us have used
Yeah.
for a long time. Um, and then
Yep.
um, and then as far as finding me, I'm in a bit of a transition as far as my online presence, but what I will say is my current website, and this will be funneled to my new website eventually.
Uh-huh.
It is yourstoryfinder.com. And
Okay.
and you can find out all the information about my book there. You can find out about book coaching, or if you're interested in um, engaging me for a speaking gig or whatever. Everything is there. I am in the process of redoing all of that, but that link will still get you to where I end up. I think it's
And
going
you're
to be
on,
SuzetteMullen.com, but that isn't
love
live
it.
yet, and I'm not sure when that is going to be live. So go to yourstoryfinder.com.
Excellent. And you're on Instagram as well. Often I see
Yes,
you there.
thank you. Yeah,
Mhm.
Instagram is probably the best place to reach me, and um, yes, and the that that handle's going to change too,
Yeah.
but so it's right now it's you are Story Finder, but if you just put Suzette Mullen in, you'll find me,
Mhm.
and
Excellent.
so yeah, thank you.
And I'll put those in the show notes, of course. You will have
Great.
all the info. Is there anything else you'd like the audience to know?
Well, I guess I'm thinking about the title of your podcast, Permission
Mm.
Granted, and um, I think that many of us, and I would say women in particular, feel like we do need permission to go after our dreams, to live our lives, to put ourselves first. We've been conditioned to think that we should put ourselves last, and it isn't selfish, in my view,
Mhm.
um, to make choices that are allowing you to be fully who you are, because and to show up in the world fully who you are. And
Yeah.
the, you know, I'm sure you've said this, and I'm sure many of your guests have said this, but you're the only one who needs to give yourself permission. And
I love it.
it took me a long time to learn that, and it still can be hard at times. Because we don't operate in the world in a vacuum. We operate in
Yeah.
relationship. And it's not to say that we don't care what other people think or feel or impact on others, but um, I think that the world is a better place when we're all showing up fully as ourselves.
Yes. And when you do it, you liberate others to do it for themselves. So It's a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, well, Suzette, thank you so much. I'm so happy that we had this conversation, and I'd love to have you on again sometime as well.
Thanks, Juliet. It was a pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'm so grateful you were able to join us today. Please share and like and review this podcast. Also, if you have any comments or questions about anything, I would love to hear from you. You can reach me at juliettericci@gmail.com, and info is in the show notes. Till next time, have a great week.